My name is Arun Prakash, and I am the creator of Arun in Denmark, a platform where we explore diverse professional landscapes, share career insights, and highlight the stories of individuals. I'm reaching out to extend a heartfelt invitation to the uh, guest for today, which is Natalie. Natalie, welcome to the channel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, pleasure having you. I would like to start with welcoming you and would like to know more about you. Give us a short introduction about yourself.
Right. So I'm originally from Brazil,
Mhm.
but I have dual citizenship. I'm also Italian. So that made things a lot easier when coming to Denmark. I've
Okay.
now been here for almost 10 years.
Mhm.
Um, I work as a marketing manager, um, and I have a Danish partner and a cat.
Okay.
Um, and I first came to Denmark to do my master's degree, but I'm
Mm.
guessing you have a lot of questions about that as well.
Yep, absolutely. But thank you for the short introduction. The first segment of this podcast is to obviously, there's a lot of people looking for opportunities from non European countries. And those are the audiences that I'm aiming to cover and be knowledgeable of. So, since you have a background with, of course, you have a background, the roots in Italy and Brazil, talk a little bit about how the market, the job market in Brazil, from the way you look at the job market in Denmark.
Yeah. So yeah, in my case, the documentation part was extremely easy, right? Because you can work on the same conditions as Danes when you have an Italian passport. But when that's not the case, there are obviously other things you can do. I'm not an expert in anything when it comes to law, but what I can advise is like general tips and tricks on how to get a job in Denmark, or in any case, things that have worked well for me. So in Brazil, and to go back to your question, right, to contrast the two countries. In Brazil, we have a much more hierarchical structure. And that's a bit of a shock for a lot of expats here. It was a little bit for me, realizing that when your manager says to you that their door is always open, they actually mean that. If you know, in my previous career, I worked for 7 years in Brazil before moving here. And whenever I heard that phrase, it was like, yeah, sure. It's not like you actually dared speaking up openly to your manager. But you can and you should do that here. It's actually so much so that if you don't speak your mind, there will come a time when they will come and ask you what's wrong, because you're expected to contribute that way and to challenge assumptions, no matter who they're from. So that was number one. And definitely the hierarchy aspect. And then what else is? I have to think about it a bit because it's been a while, right? It's been 10 years, and I'm almost used to the way Danes do things.
Yeah, I have some additional points. I think it's quite similar. The landscape is in India as well. I come from India, and I think hierarchy is more or less the similar fashion in India. I had some managers who had managerial rooms, and in Denmark I don't find any managerial rooms. Like my manager sits right next to me, which in fact is a huge contrast. And I feel like I'm more involved and sit close to the line manager, which means that I'm also welcome to have dialogues with him right away instead of knocking on the door and can I come in? I have some questions. So I could imagine the same. Yeah. How about the working hours? How much time do you spend working in Brazil? Is it 8 hours or is it more than
that's
8
another
hours?
aspect that's very similar to India and the States. So we hustle in Brazil. 40 hours is what they would put on your contract as a standard, but I think it's very, very common for people to work 9 to 6 plus Saturdays, or Saturdays like half a day. So 50-hour week is standard in practice, but you get paid for 40.
Okay, that's good. At least if you get paid for the weekends, then it's actually good. And how much
You
hours?
get a little bit of overtime on weekends, yes.
Yeah.
But that's another thing that I didn't know moving to Denmark. That the work-life balance is, in my opinion, wonderful. I hear a lot of comments, a lot of things say that it is not great, could be better. But from someone coming, from a culture where you work a great deal of hours more, it seems fantastic. And also the flexibility you have here. Over there, even to go to the doctor, you can't get paid by your employer. So if you leave work, no matter the reason, it gets discounted from your salary. Whereas here, as your listeners probably will know, and especially after COVID, right? There's a lot of flexibility to do the things that you need to do as long as you uh, not even necessarily put in the hours, but if you show results, most companies will be okay with you taking time off for personal.
That's a valid point. I could reflect something about it as well, because I worked, of course, in the weekends most of the time. Partly because I was in the early phase of my career, and usually for me, work is like treated to godliness. And for me, dedicated employee or working hard means like I'm doing good for the employer and I'm getting a good reputation. But in Denmark, it's the other way around. Do you agree?
I agree. Yes, and I have a personal story about that as well. In my first job, I was putting in a lot of extra hours just to show that I deserve to be there in a company, with mostly Danes in the marketing department. So to prove to my employer and to myself that I deserve that spot, and to keep the job and to do well. But there was a time when my manager pulled me aside and said, "Hey, why are you putting in so many hours? I mean, you're not getting paid for that, right? And we want you to have a good work-life balance. We want you to have other interests as well. So please tone it down. We don't want to see you here after 5 o'clock." Which is, for me, was very much a shock. It would never, ever happen.
If you have to rate Indian or Brazilian managers at one side and then putting the Danish management other side, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about empathy. Who is more empathy? Who is more showing more empathy? Is it management in Denmark or is it back in Brazil?
Yeah, that's easy. I would say Danish. Yeah. Again, going back to the point where I think managers in Denmark work relationships in Denmark, they tend to see you. Speaking from my own experience and my network, they tend to see you as a whole person. Whereas in Brazil, I often felt like a number. If you're working in a larger company, your manager, the person that you report to, that sees you every day, of course, they know a little bit about you, but your boss's boss doesn't even know you exist, doesn't know your name. You're just, someone that's there. But if you have any personal needs, if you need to take time off, well, too bad, because we have another 200 people that want this job. So we can't do it. Someone else can.
Yeah.
And it's the big contrast here, where we're actually seeing and people understand that you're not just the person. I'm not just only the Natalie that shows up for work. I'm also, someone's girlfriend. I'm also, I also have this interest that I take care of, and that's okay.
No, I understand. And I think it's funny enough that it is also similar to India, where I'm seen as a number or a system. I had similar experiences with Indian companies, but I also had Danish companies in India. And I actually see a contrast with Danish and Indian managers in India. So, and one of the key elements that I learned over the years working with Danish management is that, of course, they want to know you personally on a level, and they care about you because for some reason, my manager told me, Arun, I want to see you work for the company for 20 years. I can't see you go work late and then it also shows in the work the day after. So if you go early, have some good sleep, come back and do the work, it'll be much productive. So one of the key tips that I received and often keep receiving is that life is important. Spend most of the time balancing it, and then you will produce results even though you don't work hard. but work 8 hours and then still be able to yield the same result. And I respect my manager's opinion about it.
Yeah.
Coming to the point where the rating, so empathy, you prefer Danish managers. How about producing results? Back in India, I will tell you a short story. Indian managers are quite really good with bringing in people and putting them into work and producing results, achieving targets, making those numbers crunch, and then be able to deliver stuff. Do you see that the Danish managers are at the same energy par, or how is it in terms of producing results with managers and employees?
I think that's a little bit of a trickier question. I find it hard to give it a general answer, because I think it depends on a lot on the industry you're in. So certain industries are more competitive than others. Like in the SaaS B2B space, where I move around a lot, there is much more of a data-centric approach, where people are pushed at every level to deliver on their KPIs. But that's not what I experience in other industries. There's more flexibility, a bit more. We have targets, but if you don't reach them, that's okay. Let's just understand and let's learn from our mistakes, which is again good for the personal aspect, because you feel like you're allowed to make mistakes and you don't feel demotivated if you don't reach your targets. But I've also experienced, again, in the same space, that that makes us as a country, as Denmark, less competitive in an international scale. So in terms of new technologies, we have AI last year, right? So I've been to a ton of events where I ask the speakers, hey, what's new and innovative that's coming out of Denmark in this space? And they say nothing.
Okay.
I mean, we do have, of course, we have. I worked previously at the Technical University. There are projects going on there. It's not to say that people are not delivering valuable contributions, but we're just far behind Silicon Valley, for example.
In terms of competitive index.
Yeah.
Now you touched upon AI, and I know that in social media, I find often posts that you make in LinkedIn about content strategy, content creation using AI. Walk us through a little bit about your journey with AI and how do you work with content creation in the Danish market?
So in the beginning of last year, like when ChatGPT was beginning to get popular, February, March, I realized that it was a big change, and I had to learn how to use it just to keep competitive, right? Because I work with content marketing, so that's first it was a surprise. That's the area, that the creative area is where AI was first popular, where everyone that followed the space was expecting the blue collar jobs to be kind of like attacked first. But I realized it was important to know what that was, how to use it, and then make my mind up. So I dabbled with it for a while. I tested, and now I'm at a stage where I use AI as an assistant to do the research, to help me come up with different points of views. But I don't think it's at a stage where I can use it to write content, and I don't use it for that. And neither do any of the peers I have globally who have been copywriters before ChatGPT. So we're not there yet. But what I think it can do for us and other people who are not in marketing as well is to automate repetitive tasks. So that's where I think it's strongest right now. Not for creativity, but for automation. So the way I like to use it is observe what are the tasks that are maybe not that fun to do. What are things that you can put a process on, a standard operating procedure, because then you can teach ChatGPT to do that, and you can do that once and have that as a template. and then you can move on with your tasks much quicker when you have them.
What made you choose to dive into ChatGPT or Copilot or AI in general? Was it part of your, I would say, career plan, or is it something that you thought would be cool enough to try, or the job demanded you to learn that skill? What was your story behind that?
It was not supported or required in my previous job, so it came out of sheer interest. I just thought it was both fun and important. I figured, we've had Web3, we had crypto, everybody was talking about the metaverse, and those turned out to be fads. They went away and nobody cares about it anymore. I don't think that's the same path that AI is going to go. I think it's here to stay. And for that reason, I think it's important to learn all we can about it and figure out how it can help us. What are the tasks that it can help us with? And that's different. That's different for everybody. So I think bad reasons to go into the AI trend are because everybody's doing it, fear of missing out, and just because my boss asked me to do it, because we want to see more AI, we want to be competitive. We should go into it because it actually fulfills a need, because you see that it can now speed things up for you, and not just create extra work for yourself, not just I have to learn this and I have to learn that. No, sometimes it might not make sense.
One of the key messages that I take from you is you wanted to stay relevant in the industry. You're trying to upskill yourself by what is required, and it's also fun doing it, which is absolutely important. How to have fun while working it and trying to explore. That is so nice of you. Now, since we have touched upon marketing, AI, I wanted to know how the industry is. Do we have opportunities for non-Europeans to find in AI landscape within Denmark? Do Danes or Danish companies seek non-Europeans as an attractive candidates for jobs?
I think it goes beyond AI. I think, let's say you were the world's expert in AI and you come to Denmark. Even if you're the world's leading expert and you have nothing else to offer, I think you have a hard time here. I think, again, going back to what we discussed just now, I think Danish employers tend to look at potential job candidates holistically. So you need to have the whole package. They're going to look at your previous experience. They're going to look at how you fit in the company culture. Of course, they're going to look at your skills. That's number one in the list of priorities. So yes, if you're very good at it, there is a space for you. But it shouldn't take the rest for granted. I think look at it as a selling point, definitely, but work on filling the gaps as well.
And I've also had a lot of DMs in my LinkedIn asking for help, and that is where I led to reaching out to career consultant to know if it's even possible for someone to hire directly from a non-European country. So your journey from Brazil, and then you studied in Aalborg, I guess.
Yes, I studied in Aalborg University. Yeah.
Tell me one thing: does studying in a university in Denmark gives you the advantage of getting hired locally, or does it have to deal with skills and not just a Danish degree? How do you see this?
It was helpful because, again, it's a small country. Everyone knows each other. They wanna, and Danes think of your credibility it's based a lot on what you've achieved in this country. Yeah. It's not saying that your previous life doesn't matter. It does, but it's sort of ways. It gives it a different. It gives your CV more credibility and a different way to have these national references. But also, again, I know that this is not everybody's journey, right? People move here for different reasons. Mine was to study. But what also helped a lot to getting my first job was doing internships. So even though I had a career of 7 years behind me, I had to eat a big piece of humble pie and start from scratch. So internships here are unpaid, and I did a handful of those before I landed my first job. And that's what was I would say, the defining factor, more so than the education.
Absolutely. I fully understand with that. Internships are not taken seriously in most of the parts from where I grew up. It's just a mere formality. Oh, now I have a internship certificate that helps me get a job. No, in Denmark, it's serious. And I think that is really credited as one of the biggest assets in getting a job, more than academia certificate. And I've also seen in my own company that I work for currently, have a lot of interns work for the project, and they gradually get employed as full-time employees when they finish their education program, because they seem to be the perfect fit for the organization for the last 6 months journey being an intern or a student assistant. I fully accept that. What was the journey in that phase of life where you have to earn but you don't expect anything in return? What was the expectation from a hiring manager? Is it in terms of hours, or is it in terms of ideas that you want to bring in? What was the expectation from a hiring manager back in the days as an intern?
When I was working as an intern,
I'm putting you in the spotlight. Apologies.
I have to think about that one a little bit. I think, again, I can't speak so much from the perspective of my manager, but I can tell you what my thinking was, and that was to go beyond what was asked of me, because that's all I knew. That was both in terms of hours, in terms of effort. So I did a lot of free courses that I could find online that would supplement the experience and the tasks that I was working on. And then I looked at the people around me who were doing pretty much the same job, but but who had been there for a year or longer.
More experiences,
more experience. And I tried to see what was the gap and how could I fill that gap by myself. So I shadowed them a little bit when I could. I asked questions. I did the study on my own, right? When I found courses, events. That's a big one, both in finding, in any stage of your career, I would say. I can't see a moment where going to events is not useful, because that's both upgrading your knowledge and networking. So 2 birds with 1 stone. So I did a lot of that. And it was very quick. So the internship was agreed to be 3 months, but after 2 months, I had proven my value, and my manager put me aside. We had a conversation, and I was offered a job.
Wow.
Yeah.
That would be a nice feeling when you get employed as a full-time after being interned. Question regarding the transition from academia to industry. How is the Danish education system? Do you have the similarities that you see in Brazil, where the academia are so different from the industry's practice, or is there a bridge that helps academia to know what the current trends are in the industry? How do you see that?
I think it's better here. And again, this is another point. It's interesting that you bring it up, because there was a lot of talk in the academic circles when I was doing my master's about bridging this gap between academia and the job market. So how can we bring companies closer to students and vice versa? Which at the time I couldn't really see. Again, to me, it felt like a first world problem. Why are they complaining? Because it was already so much better than what I had experienced back home. But now, after almost 10 years, I can better grasp the difficulty. So I think, again, coming with for someone with my background and yours as well, I would imagine, Denmark is already quite advanced, but there's still some work to be done in terms of bringing students closer to companies, and that could be, for example, with foreigners. in communicating the value of doing these internships, right? Because I went through the first year and a half of my studies without really realizing how important or how much of a door opener an internship could be. So perhaps there's some cooperation there that could make it easier. I always, for all of my semester projects, I sought to do them with local companies. But it was really hard. So maybe if we had if the universities could have a closer cooperation with the industries to make these vacancies available, right? To communicate to students how they can help as students. So I think that would be that will go a long way.
We have 2 points before we wrap up, and that is, how is language impacting your life in Denmark? What do you see, and where do you see in terms of learning Danish? Could you talk us a little about learning Danish, or your life with living with Danes and talking Danish?
Yeah. So I think this is the point where your listeners are going to hate me because I'm at this stage where I think I'm slightly offended and annoyed when I speak Danish to a Dane and they reply in English. Because to me, it was always extremely important to learn Danish, and I've done that from day one. Yeah. So I actually do speak Danish, and and I think, I mean, if I've put in years of effort into learning the language and I can communicate, it's like, oh, well, why speak English to me? No, I speak Danish. I don't like it. And I know that it's the opposite for most foreigners, right? They're trying to learn the language, but they can't quite keep up when two Danes are talking. So they want to be included and they want people to speak English to them, which again, I mean, is totally understandable. And I think languages is the number one factor that makes it difficult for expats when coming to Denmark to find jobs, to feel integrated, and basically to thrive. So my advice would be 100% invest in the language. It's really, well, it's easy for me to say, but it's easier than you think. If you put in the hours, it's possible. You can learn it.
So some tips to learn Danish, apart from, of course, people who are employed in a company, they have access to, let's say, company sponsoring education for them. There's also option that you can take state-funded programs in public schools. What did you choose, and what was the thing that you prefer?
So I took, I think, 3 years of lessons paid by the state. I know that the regulations changed a bit, and I'm not sure if everybody still gets the same 3 years. But that was the offer for me back then. So I took the whole package. And I would ask questions. Again, same attitude that I brought to work, I would bring into my Danish studies. I took it very seriously. And then start speaking as soon as you can, like even in the supermarkets, right? It's always, there are some situations where you can have a script. In the supermarkets, they're always going to ask, is there anything else? And they're going to wish you a nice day. So you can start getting used to those sentences and prepare your answers. And that applies to other scenarios as well. So start small, start speaking, put yourself out there. Another big tip I could give is to volunteer, because that will not only help you with the language in most cases, but it's part of the integration process as well. And the Danish society is structured around this foreningen. So these communities, right? So find something that you're interested in. I, for example, like working with the elderly, because that helps a lot with the language, right? Usually, older people have a need to speak. They wanna be talking, and they don't have enough people to talk to. So that's the place where it's a perfect match.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Natalie. That was a lot of information. I'm going to share this to all the audiences that I have in LinkedIn and also on YouTube. It's a pleasure having you on the podcast. And have a nice day.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Looking forward to seeing the result.
for sure.